Right, time now to speak to the opposition. Let's bring in Kevin Hollinrake, the Shadow Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with the markets, which are obviously selling off once again in light of the ongoing trade war. It shows that yesterday's reprieve, I guess, was short-lived. At the same time, we've seen tariffs imposed by the US on China escalate to over 100% because China retaliated. Does that vindicate the Prime Minister's decision not to retaliate?
Well, I think we'd rather not retaliate. We'd rather come to an agreement with President Trump to try and waive these tariffs altogether and set them aside because they're neither good for the US nor the UK. And there are reasons why we could get to a deal with the US, not least because we don't run a trading surplus with the US, so the US hasn't got a trading deficit with us. So that's his reasons, he says, for imposing these tariffs. So we'd really hope that the government is able to strike a deal. We think they've been too slow so far. They should have been doing this earlier, as soon as President Trump entered office, or even before that. But nevertheless, we are where we find ourselves. So we wish them well with the negotiations. I think what they've got to do at the same time is make sure the domestic economy is doing well. And it's not. It's really suffered a crisis of confidence because of the actions the Chancellor has taken in terms of talking the economy down and then hitting with a massive hike in taxes, which are really hurting businesses right now. So they've got a kind of double whammy effect. So it's really important the government now steps in and does what it can to try and ease that pain.
On that note, pleased to see the announcement of the new theme park in Bedfordshire.
Very much so. Of course, we want investment in the UK. That's something we worked on for years. We helped the Universal Studios acquire that land, secure that land. So we welcome that kind of investment in the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. But I would also welcome investment in the north of England, to be honest, in the Midlands and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland and the southwest. And it's somewhat disappointing that the Chancellor has announced investments, announced infrastructure investments such as Oxford-Cambridge corridor, Luton, Heathrow, Gatwick. What about the north? What about Network North now? Northern Powerhouse Rail, A1 dualling north of Newcastle, all those kind of things. If we're going to properly level up this country and not have all the wealth and prosperity focused and concentrated in London, the southeast, we need to make sure we have investment right around the country.
Which, of course, was a question during your time in government as well. Let's touch on a report that's come out this morning. It's survey data based from Henley & Partners and New World Wealth. It points to the number of millionaires that might be leaving the country as we speak. Is that a concern for the economy as a whole? And, of course, it comes in light of a two-stage process to abolish the non-dom tax rules that was started by Jeremy Hunt. Should they be reinstated?
Well, Rachel Reeves has gone a step further. I personally didn't like what we did in non-doms. I think when you explain the non-dom status to people, you are not talking about not taxing people's income. In the UK, you are talking about taxing differently or not taxing income they earn or assets they have in other countries where they come from. If a wealthy entrepreneur comes from Australia or India or the US and comes to the UK, the question is, should you tax the earnings and the assets they have in those foreign jurisdictions? I think we've got to be very careful about that because we'll stop people coming to the UK. And often those people come to the UK, they invest in the UK in new businesses, new enterprises, which then generate tax, and they pay tax to themselves through some of the consumer habits they have when they come to a country like the UK. So I think we've got to look at this very carefully. I can't forecast what our policy is going to be in the future on non-doms, but I certainly think that it'll be better than the current policy, which is very detrimental and a massive deterrent to people of high net worth coming and staying in the UK.
How would you deal with the issue with the Birmingham bin strikes? It's obviously a local issue. It's a council issue, but should central government be getting involved?
Yes, of course it should. And Angela Rayner, who is a union background, she's taken donations from Unite, who are the union involved in the strikes that are calling the workers out on strike. She should step in, and she hasn't done that. She should use what influence she has with Unite to get them to call off this strike. It's a national embarrassment. It's approaching a public health emergency. We've written to the health secretary to say these are very serious situations which are causing the potential for lots of diseases amongst the population of Birmingham. It's totally wrong. The Labour Council is responsible for this. It negotiated a terrible deal back in 2017 with Unite. And you couldn't make this up, could you? Then Unite, together with the other unions, sued the council on the basis of the deal it struck. I mean, it's just laughable. And the unions do an important job. I'm not saying we could do without unions. They do an important job, but they represent one side of the equation. And Angela Rayner's got to recognise this. She's got to get involved. She's got to go to the city. She hasn't been to the city yet. I went last week. It's a disgrace. But she's got to get into a room with Unite and sort them out and get them to come to a reasonable position on this dispute.
Just finally, talk of potential need to nationalise British steel to keep blast furnaces open. Is that something that should be considered, given the state that these key industries are in with tariffs being imposed?
Well, before politics, I was in business for 30 years. And in business, you've got to have alternatives when you're in a negotiation. So you can't take it off the table because otherwise, if you recognise the fact that we need primary steel-making capability in the UK, which we do, and the opposition and Labour Party did when it was in opposition, it said it would defend primary steel-making capability, then we can't let Scunthorpe go because it's the last plant that makes virgin steel in the UK. It's already overseen the closure of Port Talbot, which was the other plant making virgin steel. So we need this plant. So ideally, we come to a deal with British Steel, Yingye, the Chinese-owned company that owns that facility. If not, you've got to look at other alternatives. So you can't take nationalisation off the table, but that certainly wouldn't be our preferred option.
Kevin Hollinrake, good to see you as always. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Will.